free tuition.
Making quality childcare affordable.
You have a right to a living wage.
There's just an absolute starvation for the other side of the story.
So we were climbing up like this, and now we've dropped down a lot. I'm able to take risk. You're falling behind, and that will have lifelong effects.
There are no rights, technically speaking, without responsibilities. And all we've had for 60 years is a dialogue about rights. Well, that leaves a hole on the other side of the story, and it's a hole that's in people's hearts, essentially. Because responsibility, well, perhaps that's not more important than rights. Like I said, they're part and parcel of the same formula. But it's in responsibility that most people find the meaning that sustains them through life. It's not in happiness. It's not in impulsive pleasure. Those things blow away at the first ill wind. But to adopt the responsibility for your own well-being and to try to put your family together and to try to serve your community and to try to seek for eternal truths and to live them, that's the sort of thing that can ground you in your life enough so that you can withstand the difficulty of life. And when you tell people that, especially when you include yourself in the audience, let's say, and you're not finger waving from above, then everyone knows that it's true.
I hope the option package is good. I'm able to take risk, and I think the company has a great future, so I'd prefer to get stock options even more than cash compensation. I hear some other companies are paying a lot, but treat me fairly and emphasize the options. You should look at the code that I've written. I'm kind of crazy. I write software programs way beyond any classes that I've taken and think I've gotten better over time. So take a look at how ambitious I've been there. I do think I can work well with people. I might criticize their code a little harshly, but overall, I like to be on a team. I like ambitious goals. I like thinking through how we can anticipate the future. Software is cool, and I want to be involved.
There's been this attempt to identify masculine competence and power, let's say, but mostly competence with tyranny.
The problem is toxic masculinity.
Toxic masculinity.
And that's very, very hard on young men. It's also hard on young women, for that matter. But it's very helpful for people to hear that they should make themselves competent and dangerous and take their proper place in the world.
Competent and dangerous? Why dangerous?
Because it's the alternative to being weak. And weak is not good. The people who shoot up the high schools, they're weak. They're weak.
How is it good to be dangerous?
Because it makes you formidable. And life is a very difficult process. And you're not prepared for it unless you have the capacity to be dangerous. That doesn't mean that you should be cruel. It doesn't mean any of that. There's a statement in the New Testament, the meek shall inherit the earth. But the meek isn't well translated. It means something more like, those who have swords and know how to use them but keep them sheathed will inherit the world. That's a way better way of thinking about it. You have to be powerful and formidable and then peaceful, in that order, right?
You are the most significant warrior for peace I've ever met.
And that's not the same as being naive and weak and harmless, which is what young men are being encouraged to be. It's like, that's a very bad idea. It's a very bad idea. Because naive, weak, and harmless means that you can't withstand the tragedies of life. You can't bear any responsibility. You'll end up bitter. And when you get bitter, then you get dangerous.
Almost any dimension of inequity, race differences that we see in the United States that are still troublingly large, the difference between the wealthy and the not so wealthy. This pandemic has made those differences even worse. We can see it through schooling. If you live in a small house, you don't have a great internet connection, you go to a public school that's not doing online learning very well, you're falling behind, and that will have lifelong effects. Whereas if you're out in the suburbs at a well-funded public school, or even more extreme at a private school, they're probably doing a good job at the online learning. You probably have a great internet connection. You probably have a room that you can get away and get, peace and quiet to try to concentrate on your studies. The jobs that are well-paying many of those are the jobs where we can sit at home and just use Teams or Zoom and continue to be paid for that work. Whereas if you're a waitress at a restaurant, doing a tough job, working hard, not well paid even when you do it, you're not even getting the hours, so you're not getting the opportunity to work. And so we didn't prepare well for this pandemic. I was one of the voices that warned that something like this could happen. When the nuclear attack came, we were supposed to go downstairs, hunker down, and eat out of that barrel. Today, the greatest risk of global catastrophe doesn't look like this. Instead, it looks like this.
You say compassion is a vice?
If it's taken too far, you don't treat adult men as if they're infants. You don't divide the world into victim and oppressor, and then assume that all the moral virtues are on the side of the so-called victims. It's an extension of the infant predator narrative, as far as I can tell. Now, you're either an infant or a predator. Well, that's just not a good way of conceptualizing the political world. There's an entire literature, psychoanalytic literature, on the dangers of overcompassion, hyperprotectiveness, helicopter parenting, all of that. When you have children, you have to encourage them. You have to encourage them to take risks because they have to grow up and take their place in the world. You can't protect them too much because if you do, you destroy them. That's the motif of Hansel and Gretel, right? Two kids lost in the woods. They find the gingerbread house. That's a little bit too good to be true, right? It's not only shelter when you need it, but it's candy. What lives inside the house that's too good to be true? The witch that devours you, right? That's excess compassion. So you don't want your mother to do everything for you, that's for sure. There's a rule if you're dealing with the elderly in like extended care homes. Don't do anything for your clients that they can do themselves because you undermine their autonomy. And so there's a certain amount of harshness that goes along with that, just as there is if you're a good mother, because you have to separate yourself from your child and allow them to make hurtful mistakes, right? I mean, it's very difficult if you're a compassionate person to stand back far enough to let your children take necessary risks.
One amazing positive thing is that in most years in these developing countries, there actually is gradual but very positive progress. That is, since the year 2000, we've cut the number of kids who die before the age of 5 in half. Literacy rates are going up, malnutrition's going down. So normally when we deliver this report to the United Nations that has these ambitious goals called the Sustainable Development Goals, normally we're documenting that slow but steady progress and highlighting the countries that are doing the best and talking about some of the heroes who have either invented things or toiled out in the field making that progress. This year, sadly, our report was pretty much a downer. Things that we look at, like how many kids are getting vaccines, because of all the disruption to these health systems, it's dropped all the way back to where it was 25 years ago. And so we were climbing up like this, and now we've dropped down a lot. And that means lots of diseases like measles, there'll be a rebound in deaths